our governor, Chris Christie. I just want you to know, Governor, you're sitting where Judge Napolitano was, and I'm sitting where Reverend Sharpton was. So, but in a special way.
No comment.
in a special way. Can we have a round of applause for our governor? A hard I see Chairman Pelosi is in the back, and Lenny Ward, Governor. They've each had at least 3 sandwiches. So, but in a special way, Governor, you've made reentry and treatment a cornerstone of your administration, and I would argue that you've tackled the shame of the discrimination and the shame of addiction. And could you talk a little bit about how do you think we've come and what do we yet have to achieve?
Well, first of all, thank you, Governor. And I we've gone a great distance in the last 6 years, if you think about it. 6 years ago, the general attitude was that anyone who had a drug addiction issue and involvement in drugs was to be tried, convicted, sent to jail, and that they would learn somehow while they were in jail, the error of their ways would come out and would lead a life where they had been rehabilitated. Despite the fact that we saw statistics repeatedly that told us that wasn't happening. And that in fact, oftentimes in prison, folks were getting worse. Their addiction was getting worse, their behavior was getting worse, and then we did nothing to help them to re-enter society in a way that would help to give them the tools they need to be productive. So I think through a lot of things that you and I have worked on together, and members of the legislature are extraordinarily strong on this as well. Everything from making sure that people are getting treatment as best we can, to make sure that we take out the stigma of this by doing, and I see Senator Cunningham here, we work together on Ban the Box as a part of the overall reform that we did on parole and sentencing. These are all things that you need to do. So we've come a long way in that regard, and I think the place where we have the longest way still to come is stigma. I still believe that people view this differently. And I was in Monmouth County, and John Brogan's here, Dan's here, they're recovery coaches in our pilot program in Monmouth County. We were talking about this just the other day, that when people get cancer or heart disease or diabetes, even though often in those illnesses, your own personal conduct has contributed to the development of that disease, whether it's smoking, whether it's eating the wrong way, not exercising, all the different things we know, drinking, that contributes to these things. We don't say to anyone who gets those diseases, we're not going to treat you. We're not going to give you the tools you need to get better because you are getting what you deserve. You made bad choices. As a result of making bad choices, you're now ill, you're getting what you deserve, and we leave them alone. We never would do that. Yet with drugs and alcohol, we still have that sense of moral superiority. That somehow this is a moral problem and not a physical, psychological, mental problem. We know that it is, and we have to keep talking about it. And I think the biggest thing that you and I can do as people who are in the public eye is to continue to talk about this as an illness, as a disease, because that's what it is. And we have the tools to help people help themselves. But we've got to first strip away our moral judgment about their initial choice of choosing to use drugs. If we strip that away, we can then get to the important work of making them better. But if we don't strip that away, we'll never get there. And those folks and their families will hide in the shadows, will not come out to ask for help, and will be ashamed of themselves rather than getting help. And that just leads to broken families and lost lives.
Could you talk, thank you for that. Could you talk a little bit about the opiate addiction and the crisis that New Jersey and the nation faces?
It's everywhere. New Jersey has it, but there are other states that are even in worse shape than we are because they haven't taken some of the really smart steps that we've taken to begin to more broadly offer treatment and to give people the opportunity to help themselves. But listen, this starts in lots of different ways. Yes, we have people on the streets, young people, older people, who decide to try heroin, and that's their first crack at this. But there are plenty of folks who start because they go in for a medical procedure, surgery. They get prescribed Percocet, OxyContin, and they get addicted. I will tell you that 2 summers ago, our now 20-year-old daughter's 18. She was getting ready to go off to college. She needed to get 2 wisdom teeth taken out. She got 2 wisdom teeth taken out, and the surgeon, the oral surgeon, who took the wisdom teeth out, prescribed her 30 Percocet. 30 Percocet for 2 wisdom teeth. You know, we went and got the prescription filled. We didn't really look at it, you know, how many there were. When we got back and we saw how many there were, Mary Pat and I looked at each other and we told her to take a couple of Advil and, you know, be okay. And we just got rid of the Percocet. And so many people think they get hooked based on following their doctor's orders. And that's something that, you know, we're now, I think very soon, I'm hopeful that very soon Governor Cuomo is going to join me and 5 other states in linking together our prescription monitoring program. New Jersey is leading the way on this, and I've had a lot of conversations with Governor Cuomo, and I think they are ready hopefully very soon to join us. And that's going to make sure that we don't have the doctor shopping that goes on, and that we can also monitor the doctors, quite frankly, who are pain pill mills, who are doing it just to make money and doing it at the expense of the lives of people. And so the opioid problem comes from 2 places. It not only comes from the drug trade on the streets, it comes from the drug trade in doctors' offices and the drug trade in hospitals, where people think the easiest thing in the world to do is give somebody a pill. And the worst thing is that it lulls, especially folks who aren't aware of this problem. They think, well, I'm just doing what the doctor told me to do. And then they get hooked. And then on the black market, we know that Percocet and OxyContin are much more expensive than heroin. And so when you need to get that same high, most people cannot afford to go out and buy Percocet and OxyContin on the black market, but they can afford to buy heroin.
One of the things that we're trying to work with the Department of Health and Human Services is medically assisted treatment. And there are new avenues that literally block the neural receptors from the, if you will, the attraction to the agent, Vivitrol being one. And we're working with, right now in Ocean County, is there, and I know in the legislature, in the governor's office, there's been a discussion of medically assisted treatment, which we believe is the next generation of treatment. Could you just touch on that, Governor?
Sure, and I think, you know, I've been working with Senator Vitale on this predominantly in our office, and I'm hoping that we're going to be able to make even more strides between now and June, when the legislative session ends, to be able to do it. We were in Monmouth County with a young woman yesterday, or 2 days ago, I guess it was, 2 days ago, who, 21 years old, and she's on Vivitrol. And she has talked about the fact that not only the 12-step program that she's in, which is a large part of her success, but Vivitrol has helped her for the first time feel in her heart that she does not want to use. It's not just that she's saying no to it. She doesn't want to use. And John and Dan were both there during that meeting. That was one of the most powerful parts of that meeting to me, was here a young woman who's using a number of different approaches, both psychological and physiological, to get herself to a point at 21 years old where she said she's lived in addiction for 4 years. She's been a multiple user of Narcan to bring herself back to life after she had overdosed on heroin. So I think medically assisted treatment is I think you're right, is the next avenue that we need to put in our arsenal. It by itself will not be a cure, but it will, along with 12-step programs and other aspects of the treatment, give our caregivers and our addicts a full arsenal to be able to fight this disease. It's just like any other thing that we do in any other disease. When new drugs are developed to fight lung cancer, breast cancer, colon cancer, we embrace it. We should embrace it with this too.
Because one of the things that we're looking for is the idea, Governor, of having one dosage before somebody leaves jail or prison, so that they begin to have all the full array of treatment that you discussed, but they start, frankly, breaking that medical chemical urge to reuse.
All of these different avenues that we can pursue
I think are important, but they have to be done in conjunction. You know, we can't kid ourselves. All of us would love to believe, with no matter what disease we're dealing with, that there's one shot or one pill that we could take that would cure us. And in this, at least at this stage of our understanding of this disease, there isn't one. And so the one thing I don't want anybody to do is to think, okay, well, we have Vivitrol and that will fix it. We need recovery coaches. We need recovery navigators to help them with their legal problems, their educational challenges, their workplace challenges. We need effective 12-step program implementation so that people understand how to live their lives in a productive way. Not just not be on drugs, but be a good father, a good mother, a good son or daughter, a good brother and sister. You know, this breaks families, not just when there's death, but also when there's life. You know, one of the fathers we were with the other day whose son has you know, used and been sent to emergency rooms, I think it was close to half a dozen times with heroin overdoses. He's gotten Narcan each time, been brought back, and then he said that within hours he was using again. You know, his father said, don't just give him the stuff. He needs more than that. And so while we're proud that we're one of the states that now has implemented use of Narcan across the entire state, and since we made it available to every police department and EMT in the state, which it now is in New Jersey, at the cost to the state, we've administered it 8,000 times in the last 18 months. 8,000 times. That's 8,000 individual lives that were threatened, that were saved. But if they just go back out in the next 12 to 24 hours and start using again, we did a good thing, but not a lasting thing. I want to do lasting things on this problem.
Thank you, Governor. Commissioner Lanigan and Chairman Pelosi have worked hard to reduce. In fact, if you were here just a few minutes ago, Mark Holden was singing, recognizing New Jersey's efforts to reduce the prison population and support. And again, I've said it time and time again, thank you for your financial support for the New Jersey Reentry Corporation and Volunteers of America. Guys, I'd clap. Could you talk a little bit about bail reform and what you see? And that was, in fact, it was discussed earlier that changing from a system that's based on money to a system that's based on risk, and how best we navigate those waters?
Well, you know, this is new to the New Jersey state court system, but it's not new. I mean, my formative experience was as the United States Attorney, as the chief federal prosecutor in this state, and the federal system has always been based on risk, not on money. And so this may seem like a big change for the state, but the rest of the country is already doing this. This is one place where New Jersey was behind. And my view is, what risk is the person? Two things: risk of flight and risk of additional violent acts if you return them to the streets. And lots of folks were kept in jail in this state purely because they didn't have $500 to be able to post bail. And they sat in jail for months and months and months for no reason. By the same token, we would have drug dealers, violent drug dealers in this state, who were set with $1 million bail and got out. And then went back to the streets as members of gangs, intimidated or killed witnesses, ended prosecutions against them because they had $100,000 in cash to put up. So what we did together, and Ban the Box was part of this entire bail reform proposal, was to say, let's really get at what the roots of crime and the problems are. If I don't want New Jersey to be a debtor's prison, where just because you're poor and you commit a criminal act that otherwise would not land you in jail, that you wind up having to spend months in jail because you or your family don't have the cash to be able to post bond. So let's evaluate that person based on risk and give the judge the opportunity to be able to let that person out on their own recognizance without any cash, and to set up a monitoring system to keep an eye on that person. That's what we do in the federal system. It's what we're going to do in the state system. But on the flip side, to make our streets safer, to say that for those people who have a long rap sheet of violent crime, those people should not get bail. And they don't get bail in the federal system. We want our streets to be safe. Let's keep the violent predators off the streets. Let's not fill our jail cells with folks who are only there because they're poor. And so I think it was one of the reasons why it was such a bipartisan effort, is that everyone could see the value in this. Last part is that as we're implementing bail reform, and I met with the Chief Justice twice in the last 2 weeks to talk about it because we're moving towards 2017 and the implementation of bail reform, we also need to make sure that the people that we let out of jail, we don't let out of jail doomed to failure and get back. And so if there are needs and services that are identified during the process of processing them through the criminal system, that we need to try to make sure that we make some of those services available to them so that they don't wind up just turning around and getting in trouble again if we can avoid it. And so, you know, the Chief Justice and I have some different opinions on this. And so we're gonna be working together to try to resolve those differences and get to a point where you know, along with the legislature, we can come to make the implementation of bail reform successful for everybody who's involved in it. And so, to me, bail reform was a very, very important part. And the last part, as I said, was ban the box, because if we're going to have successful reentry, people have to get to work. And I certainly don't want employers not to have full information on what they need about people that they're going to employ. But if it's set up front as opposed to on the back end, you probably never meet the person, never talk to them, never get to know them. Once you have that interview process, if you decide to extend the offer for a job, the legislation that Senator Cunningham sponsored and that I signed says, of course, employers have a right to information so they know who they're employing. But it was acting as a bar to employment rather than as a screen. It was a steel door stopping it rather than a screen. And so now they can have screening on the back end, but oftentimes when you get to know a person, that's the person you're willing to take a chance on. And we need people to be willing to give second chances in the employment side as well as on the addiction side.
Thank you. And we've talked a lot about him, one on employment, Governor, and one on the bail reform. On employment, you know, we've sort of talked to New Jersey business and industry, and we've talked to the Chamber of Commerce, and you've got the largest and most effective bully pulpit. You know, we'd love to be supportive, working with you to call the titans of industry together to create even more incentives to hire the reentry population.
Well, listen, the great news is I can do more, and we're doing stuff piece by piece. I was right before I came here, I was at a place called Arrow Farms in Newark, New Jersey. Now, this is the largest hydroponic farm in the country.
Yes.
Is growing 1.2 million pounds of food, greens, in Newark, New Jersey every year. Through grants from the Economic Development Authority, they're now expanding to a facility that's 30 times the size of their current facility, also in the city of Newark. Here's the interesting thing. As I went there to meet with them today and meet with their employees, fully a third of their employees are ex-convicts. A third of their employees are ex-convicts. And the gentleman who started this business said, you know, we feel as if it's part of our obligation to the community that we're in to give everybody a second chance. And so it's one of the reasons I went to Arrow Farms today, was not only put a spotlight on the fact that they're growing in New Jersey and creating more jobs, and they have, you know, 60 employees today, they're adding another 80 jobs when they open their next facility, but the fact that a third of their employees are folks who have had problems with the law and have a record, will tell you that there are employers out there who are willing to open their hearts and give people another chance. But you're right, folks like you and I and others have to talk even more about it. And I certainly intend to over the course of the next number of months.
Yeah, because what you've done in terms of the shame of addiction, if we can just sort of bring that moral strength to employers, and it's difficult. I mean, we're doing it with construction unions, hospitality, but obviously. The second, you know, the question is on the services and the bail reform, Governor. I mean, we've had conversations, and for many of us that are involved in recovery and addiction, as well as housing and employment, we just want you to know that we want to be of service to the judiciary and linking. And then Judge Venable was here, Judge Barisa was here, and I just think, you know, frankly, the state funds our program, and we want to help not only people that are maxing out, people that are on parole, working with the parole board, people on probation, but also that population that's pre-adjudicated.
Well, it's a new population for the state,
Yeah.
right? I mean, so my pitch to the Chief Justice has been, we've never had to deal with this population in these numbers before
Exactly.
because so many of them have been incarcerated. Now we're going to be releasing them without cash bail. And so the fact that we don't have those services now isn't proof that we don't need them.
Yep.
It's just proof that we haven't had to deal with a population this size before we're going to be
Precisely.
released, right? So my argument to the Chief Justice is, and he's a very deliberate guy. I've known him for a long time. He worked for me at the U.S. Attorney's Office, and now he heads one of the branches of government. And so, we're going to try to win the Chief Justice over to this argument, and I think that both myself and the leaders of the legislature should be able to prevail upon him that this is something that should be done, I hope, without further legislative or executive action. I think he's got the authority to be able to do it. And I'm always concerned, as you can relate to, as governor, that whenever you go back to the legislature for one thing, you come back with 9, 6 of which you don't like. And then they say, but if you want this one, you got to take these 6. So I'd rather not go back down that road. I think we've given him the authority he needs under the bill to be able to do the right thing here. So we're continuing to use gentle persuasion to try to get it done.
No, and thank you, because I think that's important to this whole community, is providing those services. Could you talk a little bit about what you're doing at Fort Dix?
Well, listen, Mid-State Correctional Facility was a facility that we've closed. And one of the reasons we've been able to close it is because of the real drop in prison population we've had in New Jersey, based upon all the different things we're talking about, that people, first-time nonviolent drug offenders, no longer go to prison in New Jersey. They go to mandatory treatment.
Could you tell me, has that been a success? Are you happy with it?
An enormous success, and we're seeing recidivism rates drop in double digits. For the people who go through the program. And the drug court program in this state, which by the end of this year will be expanded to the entire state, is something that we're enormously proud of. And it diverts people out of the normal justice system, gets them into treatment, gets them into detox, and gets them on the road to recovery. And I quite frankly don't feel as if, especially for the nonviolent folks, they need to serve time in prison. They need to get their lives in order. And so it's allowed that prison to close. And what the commissioner and I have decided to do is that Mid-State is being renovated and will reopen as a fully certified drug treatment facility. So what we're going to do there is that anyone who is in the prison system who has a demonstrated drug or alcohol addiction problem, for the last year of their sentence, will be transferred to Mid-State, and we'll have over 700 beds available at Mid-State. And they will get that period of time to get intensive drug and alcohol rehabilitation therapy certified, so that when they come out, they get all the benefits from having gone through a certified program. So it will be certified by our Department of Human Services, and it will be run in a way that allows these folks to get the treatment they need, so that they're not just wasting away in prison in that last period of time that they're serving, but that they're getting the tools then, so that when they do reenter, that's one box we've checked, a big box. And then that support system that you're helping to set up, and Volunteers of America are helping to set up for our reentry program, will be able to focus on the other important parts of reentry and support for the recovery program they've already gone through in prison. I think it'll be the first of its kind in the country at the state level to be completely dedicated and certified to drug and alcohol rehabilitation. And it's, again, part of our philosophy, which is this is a disease. And if someone turns up with cancer in state prison, we get them treatment. If they turn up with heart disease in prison, we treat them. But if they turn up with drug and alcohol problem, that disease, we don't. It's illogical, and it leads to greater recidivism and death and the breaking up of families, and we shouldn't be doing it. And so that's why I'm really proud we're going to do that at Mid-State, and we hope by next year, 2017, the renovation, because it's a pretty significant renovation to turn it into that kind of facility, but Corrections is working hard on it, and I think by next year we'll have it open and ready to receive prisoner patients.
And that's incredible that the governor's closed the prison and it's being turned. Governor, we heard time and time again, I wish you were here for Gary's comments on expungement, and the fact that people carry the scarlet letter F for felony throughout the entirety of their life. And do you see any possibility in these next months and time to look at that question of grappling? Because, I mean, frankly, it's such a difficult question for us. It's such an expensive, lengthy process, that we don't do it because it consumes all of our legal time. Do you think there's a possibility of looking at just mitigating or reevaluating the process?
Sure I do, and I think but what we have to do is do it in a really thoughtful way, and not in a piecemeal way. The same way that I fought very hard against bail reform being done in pieces. And I remember Senator Cunningham having a couple of conversations in my office about, she wanted ban the box done. It was her cause. I agreed with it, but I said to her, Sandy, if we do ban the box alone over here and I don't get bail reform done, I'm never going to get bail reform done. But putting ban the box with bail reform will help us get it all done. And, we had some spirited conversations about that back and forth over some time, but it turned out to be the right strategy. We got it all done and made the situation for all those folks better. What I want to do with expungement is not just to look at one piece or another of it, and I often get these smaller, kind of narrowly tailored bills because, in all fairness to members of the legislature, someone comes into their office, complains about a particular problem on expungement. They say, we'll write a bill to help fix it. And they'll send it, and it gets sent to my desk, and I say, well, what about all the other things? And I send it back and say, no, this isn't good enough, I want to do more, which is what I've done on expungement before. So what I'm hopeful of is that as this movement grows, and it's a movement now to reform criminal justice across the country, New Jersey's ahead of any other state on it.
Mark Holden said that. He was just here, but he talked about what New Jersey has done, so you should know that.
And I'm happy to hear that he agrees, and that expungement has got to be part of that. If you ban the box, all these things logically go together. But let's not do it so that one set of people get a chance at expungement, but others don't. And if there are certain people and certain types of crimes that shouldn't be subject to expungement, then we need to be clear about that. So we need to have a full conversation about it. I'm ready to do it. I think this is something that could be done between now and June, quite frankly. If the legislature wants to do it, I think we could do it.
I think we can clap a little louder.
And I know I'm getting together in the next week or two with Senator Cunningham, and I'm sure this is one of the topics, saw it on my calendar. So this is one of the topics of conversation I'm sure we're going to have, and she's been a leader in dealing with, and the reason why I like dealing with Sandy on these things is this. She is not, and I do have to deal with some of these folks at times, politicians who just want to make a headline. The great thing about Senator Cunningham is she listens to her constituents and deals with the real-life effects of the holes in the system. And so when she comes to me with ideas, they're always on, this is a real problem. I've heard it from so many people in my district, and I think we can help to fix it this way. That's the approach I want to take to expungement. Let's fix the real-world problems. Let's not work to make headlines on this.
Just two last things. One, and I want to thank you for addressing the expungement issue, but I also want to thank you for, and Commissioner Velez was here earlier, there was a 28-day prohibition on accessing welfare, general assistance, and you waived that for people that are in our program. And the real problem is that people would come out of prison, they'd have to wait 28 days to get services or to get benefits, and we'd lose them in that 28-day period. Lindsay's shaking her head. Lindsay runs our Ocean County down in Toms River program with Mayor Kelleher. So I just want to say publicly, Governor, thank you for your administration for doing things that matter. And also MVC, with John, who you met, John, over there in the corner, that with basically sharing with us the entirety of abstracts, so that if somebody has an outstanding violation, that they're not being brought into court that will result in a parole violation, a probation violation. So thank you very much for those.
Well, listen, part of the general assistance benefits issue was, and I'm sure you can relate to this. There's a lot of things going on when you're governor that you don't know about. Plenty, right? I used to say all the time that the scariest thing about being governor is I got 60,000 people with letterhead with my name on it, and I don't know what they're doing with it every day, all right? And so, you try to pretend that you know a lot, and you often know a lot of what's going on, but you know everything. And it was the governor who brought this issue to my attention. And it makes absolutely no sense. If people are eligible for benefits, they're eligible for benefits. And if, in fact, that first 28 days is one of the periods when they are the most vulnerable to falling back, then why would we say to them, yeah, but we can't help you in the first 28 days, but survive the first 28 days on your own, and then we'll be happy to help you. Well, you know, that's like I'm gladly to pay for a hamburger tomorrow that you give me today. You know, it doesn't work, and it makes sense for anybody. So what we want to be about in this administration is what I said in relation to Sandy. We want to fix real problems, and this is not a game of gotcha. So why not have the MVC fully share all that information? We're not looking to get people in trouble. We're looking to get them out of trouble and get them back on the road to recovery and to responsible citizenship, because then they get employed. Then they pay taxes and they support families. And families who are on general assistance come off general assistance. Families who are on food stamps get off food stamps. Families that were dependent upon the government become supportive of the government. And those are things we should all be trying to achieve, and playing these little gotcha games don't make any sense to me, and that's why we have, you know, we keep trying to stop doing it. If you got other things that we're doing that we shouldn't be doing, tell McGreevy. You know, he has my number. Believe me, he uses it, so.
And Governor, I just want you to know that we've achieved a 19.2 recidivism rate in New Jersey reentry sites, and that's in Jersey City, Newark, and Patterson, and Toms River, thanks to our great staff. And a 58% employment rate.
Yep.
So
It's great
that
news.
The changes that you brought about do provide for opportunities. And so I just want to say thank you. And as we move forward with the bail reform, I just want to pledge humbly our commitment to be of assistance to you, and hopefully making the judiciary aware of the fact that people pre-trial can use these services.
Yep.
And it would be a waste of an opportunity not to avail ourselves of these services.
We got to make sure that we do it the right way and that we bring the judiciary along with us, because if they're resistant to it, they won't utilize the services, and then we wind up spending money on stuff that is not being utilized in the right way. So we got to bring the judiciary along. And I want to tell you, you know, the great news, and to hear a 58% employment rate is fabulous. And I was just over at Aero Farms talking about the fact that today, as of today, February's statistics, there are more people employed in New Jersey today than at any time in our state's history. Over 4.3 million people employed in New Jersey. Unemployment rate is now down to 4.3% statewide, 0.6 of a point below the national average. Good things are happening here because of folks like you in this room and others who are revitalizing New Jersey's employment economy, and we need that for all the families of our state. We want folks to be able to be employed, to feel good about what they do every day, to work hard, and to support their families. And when mistakes are made, that we give them a pathway to a second chance. And to me, the most important thing that all of you are about, and what I want to thank you for, is that, you know, you hear folks often who are in the throes of addiction and coming out say they saw the light at the end of the tunnel. They saw a glimmer of hope. They use phrases like that all the time. You're that. You're the light at the end of the tunnel. You're the glimmer of hope. Their families are often as damaged as they are by the addiction. And they can't often be the glimmer of hope. We were talking yesterday about how if you haven't been through it, it's very difficult to understand it. And so a family who's damaged by addiction looks at their family member and says, stop. And the family member can't help them to understand that they want to stop, but they can't. And so you say, you're destroying your life, stop. And the person inside's crying out for help, but that person often can't provide that help because they've never been where they are. The Recovery Coach program, the work that we're doing on reentry is to say, we've been where you are, and we're on the other side, and we can help lead you to where we are. You have to walk with us. We can't wheel you. You have to walk. You have to participate. But I can't tell you how impressive what you all do every day is and how much it's making a difference in our state. And I'm just proud to be a small part of it, to be able to let all of you know that the state is going to stand there and be your partner in it. And the governor deserves great credit for continuing to talk about this. There's not a time that we're together when he's not talking about this, believe me. But that's good. It's good because I've watched him over his entire career. When he has a cause, he knows how to advocate for it. you all need to advocate too. He talked about the bully pulpit before and me talking about these issues, and I will, and I'll continue to, but I need you all to do it too. We need people from every neighborhood in this state, every color, every race, every religion, to say it happens in our families too. So then it becomes everyone's problem, not someone else's problem, everyone's problem. And we need to acknowledge that. That will continue to lower stigma as well. Because if you think it's just in somebody else's family, you can look askance at that, right? And say, well, not good parents, not good, whatever. We tell you, we know that's baloney. We know that every family in this state has been touched in some way by addiction, whether it's a member of their family, a coworker, a colleague, a neighbor, a more distant relative. We've all felt it and seen it. I have, everyone else has. And so no one is above this problem. It's non-discriminatory. It's one of the ugly, non-discriminatory things in our society, addiction. So I can't thank you enough for doing what you're doing. We need people to help each other and understand that it's all our problem, because when a family breaks up, we, the taxpayers, the citizens of this state, step into that breach, and we're not very good at it. Moms and dads are much better at it than, government officials, so let's do that.
And the last question is, Governor, and I appreciate your time, for the governor goes, this is, whether it's the Quran, whether it's the Bible, the Hebrew Bible, this is a season of faith. And you've spoken very powerfully, and we have a lot of supporters of faith-based movement here. Can you just talk about your sense of faith and the role of recovery and reentry and how that's transformative? I know my dear friend, Reverend Gloria Walton, was sitting right up. I mean, the women pray every day, every morning, and it's so can perhaps on this, and the imams can pray, and Rabbi prayed earlier, and Father Schiller. Can you just talk about the importance of appealing to our better angels, both personally and as a community?
Well, it's indispensable, right? I mean, there's no substitute for believing in the fact that there is a higher being and a higher calling in our lives. Now, listen, we're all human, and in my view, God created us with our flaws. And so we don't respond to our better angels every day. I don't, you don't, and I don't suspect anybody in this room. And I'm looking around, I don't see a perfect one here, but if I missed one, raise your hand. All of us have our flaws and our shortcomings. And the thing that provides us with the possibility of salvation from those flaws is the idea that we do answer to a higher being. And for those who are in the midst of addiction, sometimes that higher being is the only person they can turn to. The only person that won't judge them. The only person who will say, I love you unconditionally. The great thing about faith is that faith is rooted in unconditional love. In my faith as a Catholic, we believe that Jesus Christ loved us unconditionally and gave his life in order to give us a path to forgiveness and salvation. And so if you're an addict and you're a Roman Catholic, your faith in Jesus Christ has to be one of the touchstones that brings you back from where you've been. Not the only one, but one of them that brings you back from where you were to where you want to be. And that's no matter what your faith is. That's mine. That's the one I can speak to and the one I personally relate to. But each one of the people in here, whether you're a different type of Christian, a Jew, a Muslim, Hindu, Buddhist, whatever your faith is, or, if you're lost at the moment, I'm not quite sure whether you believe. We need to find that faith. We need to look for it and find it. And sometimes we find it in places that we would never, ever believe. Never believe. But God speaks to us in many, many different ways. And I love to hear about the ladies who pray every morning. It reminds me of the fact that this is hard. Amen. Right? God does not intend, in my mind, to make it easy for us. And it reminds me of my Sicilian grandmother who used to take me to church every Sunday. And she was trying to impress upon me that prayer was something that I should engage in to find out answers. And so I was young, I was 8 or 9 years old, and I had a particularly difficult test coming up at school. And so I prayed to get an A. I studied hard, but also prayed to get an A.
Jacqueline, are you listening?
Yeah, I prayed to get an A. And Jacqueline, here's the good news. I didn't. And I got a C on this test. And I was really upset. And I went for the weekend to my grandmother's apartment, which I often did in West Orange. And we went walking to church together on Sunday morning, as we did every time I stayed there. And she said to me, "Christopher, have you been praying?" And I said, "Yeah, I have." I said, "But I'm not praying anymore." And she said, "Why not?" I said, "I prayed to God, and God did not answer my prayer. And so I'm not praying anymore." And she stopped. I remember exactly, we were on Northfield Avenue in West Orange. If I close my eyes, I can still picture it. She stopped me, grabbed my arm, and she said to me, "Christopher, you don't understand. God always answers your prayers. Sometimes the answer is no." And so I remember my grandmother saying that to me so vividly, that just because we don't always find the path we think we want to travel, just because it doesn't go exactly the way we think it should go, at the speed we want it to go, and in the way we want it to go, it does not mean that God has abandoned us. It means that sometimes we pray for things that God knows isn't right for us. And God will say no to us, but I absolutely believe my grandmother's right. He answers every one of our prayers. Just sometimes he gives us answers we don't want to hear. Right? So we need to always have that be, I believe, a part of second chances, because that's why he died, in my faith, to give everyone a second chance and a chance at salvation. So it's got to be a big part of it in my mind. And I hope that for everybody during this time of the year, as you mentioned, Governor, that we understand how fortunate we are with all the different problems we're talking about and the issues and the challenges we have. You look around the rest of the world right now, I don't think that any of us would take our American passport and trade it for any other passport of any other country in the world. So the other thing that I would hope we'd remember is, as we sit here and discuss all these challenges and problems, and they're absolutely present, we live in the most blessed nation that I think the world's ever known. And not only because we have a democracy, which we do, but I've often said that democracy's not the greatest system in the world because we don't have problems, but it's the greatest system in the world because it's the one that gives us a chance to fix our problems. So we have a responsibility to do that, and I hope that we do, and I hope that I can continue to be a part of solving problem, part of my job. So thanks, Governor.
Thank you, Governor. Let's have a round of applause for the governor.